Welcome to the informational webinar for the Advisory Committee for our Zero Barriers in STEM Education Initiative. My name is Amy D'Amico, and I'm the Division Director of Professional Services at the Smithsonian Science Education Center. I began at the Smithsonian Science Education Center almost a decade ago as a contractor. At the time, I was a faculty member in the biology department at Georgetown University, where I still hold an appointment. I began my career, however, as a middle school teacher in Cambridge, Massachusetts. The student population I served was highly diverse and very high needs. In fact, my classes were often comprised of students, 80% of whom had individual education plans. The students that I taught inspired me every day by the barriers. There's lag in the closed caption that they were able to overcome. It is their inspiration that drives me in this work to this day. I'm going to start with a little webinar etiquette. If you haven't already done so, please turn off your camera. The video feed takes up too much bandwidth and can potentially slow the feed for viewers. Put yourself on mute so that we won't have to worry about background noise. During the webinar, there will be an opportunity for Q&A. We ask that all of the questions be posed in the chat box so that all attendees can see them. The chat box function is located at the bottom of your screen, unless you've set it up differently on your computer. You may need to hover your mouse over the bottom of the screen to get it to pop up. In order to ensure that this webinar is accessible to all participants, it will be closed captioned, as you may have already noticed. Please be patient with us as we work with this technology to enable this process. Are there any questions before we begin? This webinar is designed to give you some background information about our organization, as well as the initiative we are beginning that you have all generously agreed to be a part of. To that end, we'll spend some time on 4 different topics this evening. First, we will give you some background on the Smithsonian, the Smithsonian Science Education Center, and the work that has gotten us here. Then we will talk about the Zero Barriers in STEM Education initiative that we are beginning in collaboration with General Motors and the District of Columbia Public Schools. You will also get an opportunity to hear directly from folks who represent both of these critical partners. Then, what you are all here to learn more about. We will talk more specifically about your work on the advisory committee as part of this initiative. Finally, we will share some next steps with you that will help you prepare for our face-to-face meeting in January. Pino, is the volume okay for you now?
Yes, I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm going to start with a little background information on the Smithsonian Science Education, and the work that has gotten us here. When people think of the Smithsonian, they often think of the museums on the Washington Mall. But the Smithsonian is much more than that. The Smithsonian is the world's largest museum, education, and research complex. This image shows the Smithsonian Castle. The castle was the first Smithsonian building in existence and was a museum, education, and research complex. It was also the home to the first secretary of the Smithsonian. A lot has changed since the Smithsonian first opened its doors. Now the Smithsonian is comprised of 19 museums located in Washington, D.C. and New York, along with the National Zoo. In addition, the Smithsonian has 9 research centers and 5 education centers. The Smithsonian Science Education Center is one of those education and outreach centers. Fundamentally, the Smithsonian as an institution believes in lifelong experiential learning. The Smithsonian believes that learning never ends. Within the large learning ecosystem of the Smithsonian Science Education Center is the only organization whose focus is specifically on formal education. So what happens in districts and schools during the school day? That's not to say that learning that happens outside of the school day is not important to the Smithsonian Science Education Center. And the Smithsonian Science Education Center believes strongly in bridging the divide between in and out of school learning. But for our purposes today, we will focus on schools and teachers. Smithsonian Science Education Center was established in 1985 as a collaboration between the Smithsonian and the National Academies. The Smithsonian Science Education Center is dedicated to translate education, research, and theory into action within schools and districts. The mission of the Smithsonian Science Education Center is to transform K-12 education through science in collaboration with communities across the globe. We believe that all teachers should have opportunities to engage in authentic STEM experiences, and that teachers should also be able to provide authentic STEM experiences for all their students. We know that to make a difference, we cannot do this work alone. So we collaborate with local partners, stakeholders, and subject matter experts, such as yourselves, to create a collective impact. Our mission is a lofty one, and we've been working at it now for over 30 years. So how are we working to accomplish it? Well, we have 2 core areas of work: curriculum and communications, and professional services. Our curriculum and communications group creates curriculum and digital assets, including games, simulations, and other digital supports. Professional services, that is the division that I head up, is the outward-facing group for the Smithsonian Science Education Center. Our work focuses on professional development and leadership development for teachers and administrators. We are able to take the products that the curriculum team creates and bring them alive for all teachers. We also ground our work with a systemic change mindset. So we're not looking to engage teachers, schools, districts, or regions in a one-off experience. Instead, we take research and best practices to work with schools and districts and create a shared vision of education that is equitable, inclusive, and accessible for all students. One of the goals of the Smithsonian Science Education Center, as I have alluded to, is ensuring diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion in STEM. We fundamentally believe, as the slide states, that organizations that are diverse in terms of gender, race, socioeconomic status, ethnicity, ability, geography, religion, gender identity, etc., and provide an inclusive environment that values diversity and are better able to retain talent and are more engaged and productive, are more innovative, and are generally higher performing organizations. We take this to heart in all that we do at the Smithsonian Science Education Center. I would like to state at the outset that we recognize that diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion are all interconnected or linked concepts. That said, some of our work focuses more or less on one aspect of another. For this initiative, we'll be focusing on accessibility, which is not an area that we have explicitly focused on previously. Before I get into accessibility, though, I'd like to tell you a little more about the work we already do in this space, so as to inform what we are embarking on in our work together. Given our limited time this evening, I'm only going to tell you about our diversity work, as it is most closely tied to this work. If you are interested in learning more about our other work, I'd be happy to fill you in on a later date. And please know that there is a lot more that we do related to these areas. And these are the names of the programs that we are engaged in this space. We first launched our diversity work about 5 years ago in collaboration with Shell Oil Company. As the slide demonstrates, there's not a whole lot of diversity in STEM careers. In fact, there are many STEM positions that remain unfilled due to the lack of a qualified workforce. How do we find more qualified people? By inspiring more of the population to go into STEM careers. To do this, we need to think about what the underlying cause for this problem may be. There are several root causes for the issue in the STEM workforce. These areas include recruitment, retention, promotion, and education. These challenges are mirrored in the STEM teaching workforce. Nationally, we are facing a teacher shortage. This is especially true for qualified STEM teachers. By and large, however, the teacher population is predominantly white women. This is especially true in elementary school. There is an increase in men once you get into middle and high school, but there is by no means an even spread. In order to increase the STEM teacher workforce, we need to encourage and engage more diverse individuals to go into teaching. So why is the lack of diversity a problem? Several reasons. Student-teacher racial and ethnic matching affects teachers' perceptions of students and students' academic behavioral outcomes. Assignment to a same-race teacher is associated with more favorable teacher ratings, although the relationship differs by school level. Black students score higher on achievement tests when assigned to a Black teacher. These findings are less consistent, the evidence is less consistent in Latinx students. Ultimately, students benefit from seeing someone who looks like them during their educational career. They are also more likely to consider teaching as a profession if they've had a teacher who has a shared background. Ultimately, we believe all students benefit from a diversity of ideas. One of the the things that we have done to tackle this problem is to hold annual summits in collaboration with HBCUs for district and school teams to attend. During the summit, groups work through their problem of practice related to either recruitment or retention of a diverse STEM teacher workforce. Before the summit, teams are partnered with a mentor who works with them during the summit and for the next 18 months after the summit to ensure a sustained support for implementation. To date, we've held 3 summits, 2 at Howard University and 1 at Xavier University in New Orleans. We have had 64 teams attend that represent 18 states, including Puerto Rico. These teams represent 36 districts and over 5.4 million students. We do intend to hold a summit for schools who are participating in the accessibility work next year, but more about that a little bit later in the webinar. Essentially, our hope is to take the learning that we've gained over the last 5 years in our diversity work and, our hope is to take the learning we have gained over the last 5 years in our diversity work and begin to engage in a similar yet different area, accessibility. So now we'll begin to dig into the work that we will engage with together. So let me tell you a little bit about our school district partner. The District of Columbia Public Schools is among the fastest growing urban districts in the United States for special education, serving 6,740 students with disabilities. In their 13 middle schools, they serve 6,800 students, 14% of which with special needs. DCPS is also one of the most diverse districts in the country. 77% of its students are considered economically disadvantaged, 60% of its students are African American, 20% are Hispanic, and 14% are English language learners. To learn more about DCPS, I'm going to turn it over to Chris Kenny, who is part of our advisory committee and works in DCPS. We are pleased to have him share his expertise with us. Chris, go ahead and unmute yourself if you haven't already and take it away.
Thanks, Amy. Hey, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. My name is Chris Kenny, and I am currently the manager of elementary math for DCPS. In this role, I support 14 schools with their math instruction by working with the assistant principals and instructional coaches with their professional development and coaching of teachers. I also conduct instructional walkthroughs and conduct data analysis for our formal assessment data. Previously, I was the manager of special education inclusion, where I provided support for the District of Columbia Public Schools in creating and leading professional development on strategies for teachers and administrators to support students with disabilities. I also did some curriculum writing for creating modified content for our secondary math curriculum so that all students were able to access the math being taught within the general education setting. The 2 main graphics on this slide show DCPS's vision and mission, as well as our 6 main goals for the district. Our vision is every student feels loved, challenged, and prepared to positively influence society and thrive in life. And our mission is ensure that everyone guarantees students reach their full potential through rigorous and joyful learning experiences provided in a nurturing environment. This advisory committee for accessibility in K-12 STEM education will hopefully directly impact our work to support the number of students who are college and career ready, as well as particularly support our work to having 100% of our students feeling loved, challenged, and prepared. This committee will engage in providing teachers and schools with the resources to create an environment that is inclusive of all learners in order to reduce the barriers for students who may not otherwise have access to robust STEM experiences. So the next few slides go over DC's public and public charter schools math NAEP, the National Assessment of Educational Progress Scores. While our work here within the advisory committee for accessibility K-12 STEM education will not be specifically using NAEP data. It does provide us with a framework of how we are doing as a district in math, as well as how we are doing nationally. So when looking at fourth grade math here, you can see that DC has continued to close the gap with the nation and showing long-term growth, while the nation has made minimal growth overall. This graph shows the NAEP average scale score from 2003 to 2019 focused on 8th grade math. When looking at 8th grade data, the trend is similar to our 4th grade data. DC is showing growth from 2003, while the nation as a whole has remained relatively stagnant. While DC is making gains, we still have more work to do to close the gap. On this slide, the graph reviews the average scale score for 4th grade math for national students with disabilities and DC students with disabilities. As you can see, DC has made significant gains, and we are hoping to close the gap between our national public students with disabilities. However, students with disabilities for 4th grade math have been in decline since 2009. Hopefully, our work will directly support with strategies and lesson plans that we can utilize to support those furthest from opportunity and access to engage in hands-on, inquiry-based activities to promote STEM learning. Students with disabilities in DC are closing the gap with students with disabilities across the country. However, the gap between DC students with disabilities and their non-disabled peers in DC has widened over time in some grade and subject areas, showing the need for urgent action to further support these students. And then finally, the last slide here shows a graph of how DC students with disabilities are doing in comparison to DC students without disabilities. While our students with disabilities have made growth over the last decade, the gap has actually increased. It's great to see gains for all of our students, but clearly we have work to do to bridge the gap. I look forward to working with everyone here to provide curriculum and strategies to create a culture that both engages all students and enables students to apply universal design and solve real-world problems, as well as developing a logic model that addresses the problem of practice of implementing inclusive STEM programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris, for sharing this with us. Clearly, this work is important to DCPS, and the need is great. Next, we'd like for you to hear from another important collaborator with us on this work, General Motors. Without financial support from our partners, the Smithsonian Science Education Center would not be able to function. GM is not only a funding partner in this work, they are also a thought partner with us on this journey. In fact, we have 2 representatives from GM on our advisory board to help guide our work. We thought that it is important for them to share with you why this work is important to General Motors. So I'd like for you to take it away, Hina. Are you unmuted?
Can you hear me?
Ah, there we go.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect.
All right.
Hi, this is Hina Baloch. I lead STEM education and research and data analytics for global comms at General Motors. And it was mentioned earlier, 2 of my colleagues, Christy, who leads autonomous vehicles, and Veronica, who leads engineering for innovation, would be joining the advisory panel. And hopefully with them, they'll bring a lot of knowledge that General Motors has in this area, and we'll be learning a lot from this group as well. And I hope they will later in the call get a chance to introduce themselves as well. So I just wanted to quickly touch on the General Motors overall vision and what the company stands for. About 1.25 million people around the world are killed by traffic accidents each year. This does not include hundreds and thousands of people who suffer injuries that change their lives in a significant way. Human error is still a leading cause for fatal crashes. General Motors with the many safety features in its vehicles and the move towards autonomous vehicles, has the goal of zero crashes. One more thing to keep in mind is that automobiles are the second largest contributors of CO2 emissions into the atmosphere. We recognize that climate change is real, and we not only need to move towards cars that are fuel efficient, but also need a non-electric future with zero emissions. The third key vision that GM has is around congestions. Traffic congestions add to emissions, they cause delays, they lead to daily frustrations. With a holistic view around transportation systems, we want to focus on zero congestions on the roads and on the highways. So GM has a focused approach to STEM education. Our STEM partnerships focus on K-12 and tertiary level students, with a strong focus on increasing diversity and providing training and learning opportunities to both students and teachers. We partner with roughly 70 plus nonprofit organizations around the US and 19 universities to develop top of the line STEM focused curriculum and programming. Our key STEM social outcomes are number one, increasing the number of students who earn degrees in STEM fields that match the market needs. The second outcome, which is also most relevant for this group, is increasing the presence, achievement, and persistence for underrepresented minorities in STEM fields. And then finally, our third outcome focuses on increase in supply of qualified teachers who are trained in STEM subjects. We want to make sure that our curriculum and programming in STEM is staying up to date with the technology. We've identified 4 areas of focus within STEM education from a technological perspective. Number one is computational thinking. We have created a micro-credential program for teachers with an organization called Digital Promise on computational thinking. Another area is digitization. We partner with Khan Academy, Society of Automotive Engineering, to create and implement curriculum on cybersecurity and other areas connected to digitization. Another area that we focus on is immersive learning. We work with partners like Games for Change to understand the best ways to make STEM education more engaging for students, as we know that disengagement continues to be one of the main causes for dropout. Another area that we focus on is artificial intelligence. We launched a teacher training program with in AI with ISDE 3 years ago, and have continued to scale the program and increase the number of teachers who are trained in AI education and understand the implication of the technology. We also, with another nonprofit, AI for All, that engages young students from middle school and above in AI education, have formed training programs. And with Technovation, where we work with students and families on AI understanding and literacy. I do want to close by reminding you the second and perhaps the most important STEM social outcome that we want to focus on. It is to make STEM education accessible to all underrepresented minorities. And this program with Smithsonian Institute is a step towards our goal to make STEM education accessible to all types of learners in our education system. And the technologies that we create should keep in mind the needs of different individuals with all types of physical and cognitive differences. And the movement building and rallying that has happened for giving women and people of color access to STEM education, where by the way, we still have a very, very long way to go. We can have a similar movement building for a student with different needs. Right now, General Motor partners with communication services for the deaf to increase sign language vocabulary for hard of hearing students. We have a partnership with Benetech on making math accessible to visually impaired students. And we have a partnership with AI for All on making their open source AI curriculum more accessible to learners with different disabilities. This is just a start. we have a long way to go, and we hope our partnership with Smithsonian Institute will be a step towards that. Thank you.
Thank you. And Christy and Veronica, who are, I believe, on the webinar with us as well, are the individuals on the left, and the rest of the team are the folks on the right, Matt and Hina, who you just heard from. Okay. So here is a little bit of an overview of the work that we have set forth together. This is certainly subject to tweaks and updates based on the guidance that we are provided through the work of the advisory committee. But here is what our initial vision was. Participating teachers in the District of Columbia schools will receive one Smithsonian Science Curriculum module. These will be either grade 4 or grade 8 teachers, for a total of 28 elementary and middle school teachers. Teachers will receive professional development on how to integrate inclusive design practices while implementing the module, as well as get an opportunity to see inclusive design in action at the Smithsonian. These teachers will then serve as teacher leaders who will lead their school-based teams at a STEM education summit to create a logic model focused on developing a culture of inclusive design in their school. The timeline for this work is September 2019 through March 2021. Ultimately, we're striving for 2 outcomes. First, we're hoping that teachers are able to deepen their practice in creating a culture of accessibility and inclusivity in their classrooms, and they lead their schools in creating that same school-wide culture. Additionally, we would also like students to tackle challenges and solve problems with a lens of accessibility and inclusivity. Okay, so that's a little bit of the context of the overarching work. But another key important factor here is all of you. We will now take a moment to learn more about you and the work of the advisory committee specifically. There are 17 advisory committee members. This number is actually a little higher than we were targeting, but we were so impressed by the breadth and depth of your collective knowledge that we figured the more the merrier. Not everybody was able to join this live webinar this afternoon, but we had nearly 100% of you register so as to be able to watch it at a later date. One of the things we would like to do is help teachers in schools build a community of inclusiveness. In order to practice what we preach, we would also like for you all to build a community amongst yourselves. So we want to take a moment and give you an opportunity to engage with one another a bit. Please reflect on this question and post your response in the chat box so we all might learn a little bit about why you are dedicated to this work. Thank you all for sharing. I feel as though I've gotten to know you a little bit more. And I think the rest of the group has gotten to know each other a little bit more. Veronica, I also wish we had a like feature. Clearly, these responses are pretty powerful. And we'd like for you to bring this enthusiasm and passion with you to the work that we're going to engage in. So let's talk a little bit more specifically about the expectations for the advisory committee. When you applied, you all received a document that outlined the expectations previously. So I just thought I'd dig into them a little bit more. First, we'd like for you to advise the Smithsonian Science Education Center to inform our work in collaboration with DCPS and General Motors. The folks here at the SSEC, we're not experts on accessibility, although we have done some research. We're going to be looking to the collective group to provide us input and inform us related to this work. Oh, and insight into this work. We'll want to know, what are we doing right? What are we forgetting? How can we make this the most impactful experience as possible for participating schools and teachers? Second, we'd like for you to provide access and inclusion strategies. Many of you do this sort of work every day. What have you found to be the most effective strategies for teachers? What are the least effective strategies for teachers? What language should we use? What language should we not use? Words are important, and we want to get it right. Next, one of the things that we would like to produce is a handbook or a guidebook that will inform teacher and school practice. Some of you already have resources. Are there any you're willing to contribute? Are there individuals who might be willing to help us write or review our work? This is all building up to what we're, the conversation we'll have January 31st in person or virtually for those of you that aren't going to be able to travel and join us. Say, for example, if the weather is not cooperating, which is a possibility in DC in January. The other thing that is a potential opportunity for you all to engage in the work is to be a mentor at the summit in the spring of 2021. For those of you who would be interested and able to mentor a team, we welcome your participation. We'll also be looking for folks who would be interested in working with us on program development for the summit and or facilitations of sessions during the summit. More details on that will follow later. In terms of next steps, this webinar was designed to give you some context of the work so that you're ready to dive in and maximize our time together in January. Really just high-level conversation this evening. We will begin the in-person meeting by defining our terms as a group, so we all are clear about the goals of the work. And then we'll dig into the meat of it by thinking about strategies but to be employed by teachers in schools. In order to prime the pump, we thought that we might ask you to come ready to talk about accessibility and strategies that support accessibility in classrooms and schools. Here are some of our initial ideas. Strategies for teaching all students, to support classrooms with students with disabilities, but also engage in classrooms that may not have students with disabilities, but still to support the development of inclusive mindsets in all students. Strategies for an inclusive classroom and school culture. Strategies for inclusive interactions. These can be at the teacher-student level or at the student-student level. We'd like some support in thinking about what resources might be most helpful for teachers. And also, what are we missing? What are we forgetting? Essentially, we would like for you to be thinking about these ideas so that you're ready to come and share them with a larger group in January. So to give you a little bit about the nitty-gritty in case you are curious, at the start of the new year, we'll provide you with a draft agenda for the meeting. The meeting will be held on Friday, January 31st, 9 to 5. We will be providing lunch, and it will be held here at the Smithsonian Science Education Center's offices in Washington, D.C. We've had a few folks that need financial support for travel. Our travel budget is somewhat limited, but we are hoping that for those of you who are, traveling further than a 50-mile radius, we are able to cover hotel nights for those of you. And we hope that that level of support would be able to allow your attendance at the meeting. We do have virtual options for the meeting. However, some of you are traveling a great distance. So for those of you who are interested or need some support for travel and are interested in hotel rooms, please email Eva Mushinsky by Friday, December 13th. You should have already received some emails from her, so you probably have her email address in your inbox already. And if you don't, her email is now on the screen. We encourage you to share your excitement over social media. Our Twitter handle is listed on the screen there that we've used in the past. So feel free to go ahead and check that out. Don't hesitate to reach out if you have any other questions that are specific for the SSEC staff. At this point, we have about 10 minutes left. So if anyone has any burning questions that haven't been addressed that you want to know between now and the new year, I want to give you an opportunity to ask them. feel free to type them into the chat box. And I'll give you a moment to formulate. Judy is asking if you will get a copy of the PowerPoint. We will, once this webinar concludes, we will provide you with a link to the recording, and we can send out the PowerPoint to you as well as an attachment to that email. It'll take a little bit for the recording to generate a link and for us to post it in a shareable site. So give us 24 to 48 hours. This work is for students with and without disabilities, correct? A question from Judy. How is DCPS ensuring this work lives in its strategic plan or vision around educating all students so that it sticks after the grant? I appreciate that question, and
I'd like to answer it, at least start the answer.
Go ahead and jump in. Yep.
Cool. So great question, Judy. Personally, I hope to incorporate this work in the professional development of not only our teachers, but also our school leaders. And as someone who works in the central office, every summer we review our curricular materials. And my hope is to utilize what's created here, as well as update and change some of our policy as well as guidance documents that come through this plan. And I really appreciate how Eva and the rest of the team have already decided to incorporate myself and another member of DCPS Central Office to make sure that this work continues afterwards as well. But I want to learn more about your guys' experiences, and hopefully we can take some of your thoughts and incorporate that back into our work at DCPS. And yeah, part of a summer institute, and definitely for MTSS RTI. So thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And I'll also add that our hope with this work with GM and DCPS is that, this is a pilot. We've not engaged in this work in this way before. And we hope that this will sort of create a proof of concept that we can feed forward and continue to grow its impact in the future. I don't know about all of you, but I appreciate a little bit of processing time. And I feel as though I have thrown a lot of information at you in a relatively short amount of time. So we'll keep the webinar open if people have additional questions for the next few minutes or so. But I do want to take a moment and thank you all for taking the time to attend. I appreciate all that you do. I also like to thank DCPS for the support. Chris, you've been fantastic. James has been really supportive. So we are excited to see this continue to grow and expand. And thank you to General Motors. We're really excited for you to go on this journey with us and see where it takes us together.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, everybody. Really looking forward to this work.